So let's have a conversation around BBI. Signature collection drive up in full gear around the country. We have seen leaders going around the country. We have seen public officers also being used, and there's some outcry there about public officers and civil servants being used to collect the signatures. We've seen politicians going and drumming support for the collection of signatures. Constitutionally, it's just required to get 1 million signatures, and then those are verified by the IBC. As long as the IBC can verify these 1 million signatures are genuine Kenyan voters, then you're good to go. But those that are pushing this agenda are saying that they are actually just looking for not one, not two, not three, but 4 million signatures to show that Kenyans overwhelmingly support this push to amend the Constitution. Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 was published last week. It was released to the public. And what has come out clearly is that this particular bill is not the same kind of bill. It's not the same bill that was presented at the launch of the BBI report at Bomas. So what's the conversation here? BBI drive is in full gear. The agenda here now to have the issue of amending the Constitution is also in full gear. Those that had issues about some sections of the Constitution, some of them have said, all right, well, we've seen a couple of changes. There's not exactly everything that we wanted, but we're okay. We shall move on. The Amani National Congress leader, for example, had never been opposed to the BBI report. He was just saying that there's some issues that he felt that needed to be addressed. But now he's out there in full gear campaigning for the BBI. We have seen the Deputy President, and we'll be having a conversation around this. The Deputy President had raised issues that at the launch of this report at Bomas of Kenya. Now he's saying, you know what, there are some gains that have been made since then. It's a bit different. And we are avoiding a lose-lose situation. Now we are in a win-lose situation. We can go for a win-win. He's still playing around with words. Civil society activists, however, there are those that have come out clearly even before this and said, look, we are opposed to any move to amend this constitution. And some of them, 5 of them actually have taken a case to court, and we spoke to them. This included Dr. David Ndii and Jerotich Seii and Wanjiru Gekonyo and 2 others who have gone to court, and they're saying you'd like to ring-fence some sections of the constitution against any just frivolous amendments. Now, yesterday, they were out there addressing the media, and they said they will not rest until they stop this reggae once and for all. They think that the plans to amend the constitution are unconstitutional. This whole agenda is flawed, that there should be another way of going about it. First of all, they say that this whole route of going through, collecting signatures is hoodwinking Kenyans and going through the back door. If it has to be a popular initiative, then the popular initiative has to start from the people, not the government coming up and then going to the people and telling them, no, people, this is your initiative, so it is your popular initiative. No. If it's a government, go to parliament. If it's the people themselves, go through the popular initiative. So they came out yesterday and they were addressing this. Among them, the people who were addressing this was Dr. David Ndii, Martha Karua, the leader of NARC Kenya. We've got Boniface Mwangi, who's the activist and leader of the political party as well. Jerotich Seii was there, and 2 of them are joining us this morning, and this is Jerotich Seii and Boniface Mwangi. Boniface Mwangi is activist and award-winning photojournalist. Jerotich Seii is an active citizen and a member of this show. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Glad to have you guys. We are glad to have you. Welcome to the Situation Room this morning.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Sharo, I don't want to start with you because we've already talked about this with you, and we'll have more conversations on this. Boniface, here you are yesterday joining the Linda Katiba movement, and you're saying that you want to stop the reggae. Why? What's the problem?
We don't need to have any amendments in the Constitution at this stage because there's no need to do that. And you just wrongly said that it's a government initiative. It's not a government initiative. It's an initiative between 2 men, Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, and it's a way to grab power illegally. So there's no need to do that.
I would have assumed, Boniface, first of all, good morning, Boniface. I would have assumed that the president already has power. He is the president. And I would also assume that if you are leader of the opposition, you do have power as the opposition. So this new power that they want to grab, what is it?
You're assuming wrong. There's no opposition. Raila Odinga works for Uhuru Kenyatta. So the power that
Boniface, you're making it sound as though they have an employment contract.
They do. Don't you see nowadays that mtu wa mkono wa Uhuru ni Raila Odinga? When there was the Huduma card, it was Raila Odinga on the billboards advertising that. He's a Jubilee influencer. But on a serious note, the amendments that they're actually seeking is actually blotting the government, creating the office of the Prime Minister, which you don't really need, and ensuring that when Uhuru ends his term in 2022, he has a way to come back 2023. You just spoke about corruption in this country the previous hour, and you said that Seii is looking for help from foreign governments to fight corruption. The COVID millionaires haven't been charged. The existing laws can charge people for corruption, but they're not being used. So my point is, the existing laws are more than enough to actually run this country. Why do we need new laws?
I agree with you that they're sufficient to run the country, but what I do know that even if they're sufficient, at that point or at the time of promulgation, the Constitution was just, should we say, in theoretical form. Now, would you then not argue that when you start putting the Constitution into practice and you start applying it, that things that prior to that, things which had not come up, now come up, and perhaps there would be a need for an amendment?
I agree with you, and that's what I would like to point out of two laws that actually are in place that haven't been followed. The two-thirds gender rule, where the president was supposed to actually appoint, ensure that the two-thirds gender rule is met. In his own cabinet, he hasn't appointed enough women. That is number one. Number two, in 2014, they did the Security Amendments Bill, which took away the independence of the police. So every time they change the laws, they don't change the laws to benefit the country, they change the law to benefit individuals. And so what he's trying to do is weaken the Constitution so that when he leaves power, he doesn't go to jail. Because what you have in power is a criminal president. And he knows very well an independent judiciary will jail Uhuru Kenyatta. Believe me.
Boniface, wouldn't you agree that for us to get to the point where we're thinking of jailing the president, there needs to be a case against him, and this matter needs to have been determined by a court of law that indeed he's guilty, surely? Are we just going to judge him? Are we going to just judge him on what we know and condemn him and determine that he should be jailed, surely?
I think okay, that's an opinion that I think would now then require Boniface, Mwangi, and others like you, if you've got a case against citizen Uhuru Kenyatta, to take it to court, and then let's see if it's proven that
yes, leave power. Right now, he'll kill us if you take it to court.
That's what I'm saying. Citizen, as I said, if you've got a case against, if you've got a case against citizen Uhuru Kenyatta in 2023, then you have the opportunity to take it up. Let's bring in
the reason why we need BBI to fail. If BBI fails, he doesn't come back as a prime minister or some small position from Gatundu, then you can take the man to jail.
Let's bring in Jerotich at this point as well. Chero, the push to block the BBI and the entire process, and even the collection of signatures for a referendum. This is something that you've taken to court yourselves, and now you're saying that as Linda Katiba, you feel it's ill-timed and it's actually inappropriate. It's illegal. How is it illegal?
Well, you see what happened, and good morning. Good to see all of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes. What I have understood, and from the very beginning, long before it became popular or fashionable to say no to BBI, some of us have been very clear about the fact that it is nothing more than a Trojan horse. You see, when the BBI, this creature of the March 2018 handshake kicked in, the initial idea was that the task force was to do policy and administrative reforms. The task force was in place to go around the 47 counties and see what is it around the 9-point agenda that we could put together and come up with a series of policy and administrative reforms. But as this evolved and we saw the first iteration of the report, which was eventually rejected, we moved into a space where the task force became the steering committee, which was expanded to include technical experts. Yep. And now they were tasked with also adding statutory and constitutional changes. And those So the evolution of the process for me confirms that it was nothing more than a Trojan horse from the beginning to allow two men to hook the country into believing that this is a way to cease hostilities, which in and of itself is not a bad thing, but actually an underlying was the idea that the Constitution was going to be aggressively amended to the extent that it looks like a repeal. And, you know, for me to see the government going ahead to use resources to gather the 1 million signatures, think back to Kuruau Court when he was collecting his 1 million signatures. Did he use government resources? Did he use state apparatus to go around with the party to collect those signatures? Not at all. So when you look at the whole setup, it stinks of fraud. It is a travesty of justice. And I'm glad that at 8 a.m. you will have Honorable Cholet who will go into the detail, the substance of what is so fishy and what is so unconstitutional within the amendment. And this last amendment that was launched again last week when the signature drive began, you can go ahead and see how quickly they change. They say there's no room for improvement. Then suddenly you see words and syntax and grammar being changed, a couple of things being changed to pacify some people here and there. But ultimately, this process is not about the Kenyans. And let me ask you, my three friends over there, how are your electricity bills? How are your hospital bills? You were talking about kids going back to school the other day. We are talking about a situation. This country is in crisis. This is not a constitutional moment. This is a moment where the Constitution of Kenya 2010 should be fully and completely implemented. By the time you're coming to me to tell me that this Constitution is no longer fit for purpose, you need to demonstrate to me the ways in which you have attempted to implement the Constitution fully, and it has failed. And you said, you know, Enyere, you guys, we have tried. But as Boni said, ultimately, it's about people trying to consolidate power. It's an elite compact at the top, which is meant to consolidate power for a few forever. And the rest of us Kenyans are being hoodwinked into believing that this BBI process is about us, and it's not about us.
Jerotich, if I can ask you on that point, you said something just a few minutes, you said something just a few seconds ago, which I think is extremely important. You said that people may be hoodwinked into believing that the entire Constitution is going to be changed, or there's going to be something major that is being brought about in terms of amending the Constitution, but it's a few things. And I think it's important for us to know, is it a few things that are being changed, or are we going to see a huge change in this Constitution?
It is so massive. And you remember when you last had Dr. Ndi and me on this show, we were talking about the fact that we're in court to explore the basic structure doctrine. The changes are so massive. You're touching 14 out of 18 chapters in this Constitution. It is not an amendment process. An amendment means that maybe I adjust my hair a little bit, but if I shave my hair off, then we are not amending my hairstyle. You're changing it completely. And our whole argument is that when you go into a process, hoodwinking Kenyans into believing that you're making a few ameliorative changes here and there to make it work better for you because the current Constitution is not fit for purpose. That is a hoodwink. On top of that, the nefariousness of the insertion, especially around devolution and the two-thirds gender principle, which is introducing a sunset clause, and devolution, which is the cornerstone for the advancement of marginalized communities that was entrenched in session of paper number 10 back in 1964. You know, we are seeing a clawback of that. When you begin to include and insert things, for example, the highest amount allocated to a county cannot be more than 3 times the lowest amount. So if I am receiving 1 shilling per capita in County X, and I'm the lowest county, it means County Y should not receive more than 3. So there's never going to be more than 3 times in terms of the difference. What does that mean? When you come to counties like Lamu, Wajir, Garissa, Kwale, Mandera, Marsabit, Turkana, historically marginalized counties, you're rolling it back. But then you insert sweeteners such as the Ward Development Fund, or you increase the number of constituencies, so people are running around saying, oh, we shall get more money, 140-something million in our constituencies. But in actual fact, when you're looking at devolution, even if you are saying it's 35%, you're clawing back the very reason why devolution was put in place, to ensure that the systemically, historically, architecturally marginalized counties have an opportunity to advance. And if you are saying the 35% that will be allocated will be determined according to settlement and services, what are you saying? If you are saying, I'm sitting under a tree somewhere in Marsabit, there's a small settlement there, there's an assistant chief, yes, you can call it a settlement. But the second you say my allocation of resources to you will depend on services, then you will look at that settlement and say, are there schools? Is there industry? Are there roads? What type of infrastructure investment has there been there? And then the answer will be none. And then the question will be why? But they're not asking the question why. And the answer lies in sessional paper number 10. So ultimately, what you're saying is we are giving you more, but we're going to develop a new, stringent, deadly series of criteria that will continue to entrench marginalization in the historically marginalized counties. So devolution will never be given a chance to work. Instead, we will go back to a space of centralized resource allocation and the one man, one shilling, one vote kind of concept.
Jerotich,
So
I cannot find
deadly document.
I cannot find fault with your logic at all. At all. But let me ask this question.
Yes.
If we were to look at this BBI process, the genesis, what was touted as being what they were seeking to prevent, statements by politicians, a process led by politicians, and now a discussion arising from what the politicians have come up with. What, with the exception, you're going to tell me we should try and implement the constitution. I'm going to say spot on. What then is the alternative to the BBI? A practical, workable alternative. What is it?
You have just said it. Tekeleza Katiba. I mean, the practical
No.
alternative
That's
is
the theory of it.
process.
That's the theory of it. Everyone says, make sure you implement it. How do you ensure it is actually implemented? That's what I'm asking.
But this is why we yesterday launched the Linda Katiba movement. We are saying that at the end of the day, what we are facing as Kenyans is an existential threat to Kenya through the tampering with and violation of the Constitution through this BBI process. When we say Linda Katiba, we are saying protect and defend the Constitution. You see, I agree with you that it's one thing, Titi, we can run around and say we don't want this, we don't like it, it's a Trojan horse. We can even go to court and seek guidance and so on and so forth, and seek advice on how to move forward on some of these issues. But unless we come up with a robust initiative that is not necessarily a reaction to BBI, but rather a proactive commitment by committed Wakenya, by patriots, to say we are going to protect and defend the Constitution of Kenya. Number one, because all flanks of the Constitution of Kenya right now are wide open to attack, and this is why BBI has come in. Number two, and most importantly, and why the political class, the elite political class is talking about BBI, is this issue of divisive elections, this issue of winner take all. It really boils down to IBC and its working. And even when you read the BBI, the Amendment Act, you can see that they still continue fiddling with IBC. If we dealt with issues of electoral justice, if we dealt with the servers that were never opened, this issue of winner take all would never arise. Example, Usain Bolt runs. He wins the 100 meters. He's done it excellently. And then you have second and third. And then suddenly people say, actually, it's not fair. You know what? Usain should not get the gold alone. Let's figure out a way that they can, in a dead heat, finish at the same time and all be awarded the gold. You see, this is the logic of the argument behind winner takes all, which would be rectified if we dealt with electoral issues within the IBC. And then there's issues of governance and corruption. You see us talking about it, KEMSA, switch off KPLC, managed equipment service, etc., etc. And finally, the policy environment. So, Titi, to answer your question, ultimately, what we need and what we are doing as Linda Katiba is raising a force, raising a formation of individuals who will counter BBI and any other mischievous nefariousness in future, to say first and foremost, we have a working and workable constitution.
Jerotich, what I'm seeking to actually ask you is this, really, in all honesty. Now, speaking as one Kenyan to another, okay?
Yes.
Here we have a situation where every problem that you've mentioned is real, but they're not a problem, they're symptoms. Whether it's KEMSA, whether it's desks, whether it is water in schools, whether it is counties receiving money, those aren't problems, they are symptoms. Whether it is IEBC, the problems in IEBC are not problems, they are symptoms of a bigger problem. Now, this bigger problem, we assume that the Constitution and hopefully the implementation of it would bring us that. And if I understood the argument of the BBI, well, it was the divisions that we have because of the winner-takes-all setup we have is what guarantees that the problems will continue. And their argument seemed to have been, if we find a level, politically speaking, playing ground where everybody gets to a share of the big cake, then we are able to actually formulate something that will work. I personally don't think that that is actually true. That is just political gimmickry. But what is, again, the question I asked before, yes, Linda Katiba, the thinking behind it sound. It isn't the only thinking we've had of this nature. What can we practically do to ensure that when you talk of a system that works like the IEBC, it actually works?
So the question you're asking is then how do we ensure that this Katiba that we are lindering is actually implemented?
Yes.
And it works for us?
Yes, because it's a Katiba that we have and the problems around it, we still have problems, and yet we have an excellent Katiba.
Yeah.
So,
and we still have issues.
Okay. So
let's answer that question when we come back,
if
Chero. Let's take a break at
Sorry,
25 minutes hour after 7. We are speaking with Jerotich Seii, active citizen, and Boniface Mwangi. He's also an activist and award-winning photojournalist and also a politician. We are talking about the BBI, the Linda Katiba movement of civil society activists coming out and saying this hour we are having a conversation around the BBI. The signature collection drive is well up and underway across the country, and civil society organizations have come together under the Linda Katiba initiative, and they're saying that they'd like, they're going to oppose this entire collection of signatures drive and the bill and efforts to amend the Constitution. Speaking with us this morning is active citizen Jerotich Seii and also activist and photojournalist Boniface Mwangi. Just as we went to the break, the conversation that we were having and the question that you asked Chero and Boniface CT before we went to the break was, so we're talking about Linda Katiba. How do we Linda Katiba and make sure that then this Katiba is fully implemented and we realize all the gains and the benefits that we wanted to realize in the Katiba, right? That's the question that we are asking.
that's the question I'm asking, because against the background of what we know or what we've seen and the things that we find unpalatable, we understand that. However, this alternative, which is practical and which will work.
All right. So who wants to go first? Let's start with you, Boniface.
So the power belongs to the people of this republic. And we are the ones who can vote yes or no to the BBI. The first thing you need to do is oppose BBI. When you go, the genesis of the BBI was because of electoral violence and injustice. BBI doesn't address that. The truth is, every election, people die and they never get justice. And in every handshake, the people are never part of the discussion. It's about sharing power between the two men who win. So you go back to the 2007, Kibaki Raila shook hands, Raila becomes prime minister. 2013, there was no handshake, but there was like an agreement. 2017, Raila, there's a dispute, Uhuru becomes president. Come 2018, there's a handshake between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. We never spoke about justice for the victims and how to stop the stealing of elections or election rigging. So BBI doesn't address those issues. BBI introduces another thing that we don't even need. Why do we need more positions for members of parliament? So, how do we fulfill the Constitution? By ensuring that people who are mutilating it get kicked out of power in 2022. Anyone involved in BBI should go home, because there's nothing in BBI that will make Kenya better. The existing laws can make this country progressive and can make sure that there's no inequality, but they're not being followed.
Why are they not being followed?
Because you have a lawbreaker at State House. You have a president who defies court orders. You have a president who breaks the law. You have the president who wakes up and says, my friends lost in the last election. I'm going to create administrative secretaries.
But all this with an existing constitution.
No.
So even if we removed one group of leaders from power,
yes,
how do we guarantee that the next group of leaders from power, what if even if it's Boniface Mwangi who goes to State House, how do we ensure that the next crop of leaders observe and live up to the ideals of that constitution?
So we shall know them by their fruits. The people in power today are KANU political orphans. They were taught by Moi, so they can never go away far from the tree, like who their father was. So we must ensure that the leaders we elect I don't come from this very bad poison fruit called KANU.
You know, this constitutional development we keep speaking of, we forget that it began in the Moi era, not in the Kibaki era. This very same Moi, the draconian Moi that I keep hearing of, is the same Moi who actually ushered in multipartism. So
he capitulated. He capitulated.
No.
He utterly capitulated.
Yes,
there.
Yes. Semantics permitting, he may have, but remember that the alternatives were always there. I am merely stating what happened.
I think I'm still not getting the answer to this, which is we have a constitution of Kenya 2010, which has been hailed as very progressive, which is what you're saying is a very progressive constitution. But at the same time, you're telling us that in the implementation of this constitution, we have fallen short. So if we say that let's Linda this Katiba, that this Katiba has absolutely no kinks, let's work with it, how do we ensure that we get the full benefit of the constitution?
So we must have a movement of the people to protect the constitution and find the people who can actually protect it to get into power.
You see, if I may jump in here, and I'm trying to understand, Eric and CP, what you're asking. There is not a single aspect of malfeasance, mismanagement, maladministration in this country that stems from the Constitution of Kenya 2010. It actually stems from a disobedience and a defiance of the Constitution of Kenya. Mm-hmm. And as Boni rightly stated it, when you have a head of state who spits in the face of constitutionalism, who is himself invested in various financial empires and political exploits, what does it do? Monkey see, monkey do. He ends up, and I'm talking about the entire Jubilee administration, for all of those who think I work for Ruto. I'm talking about the Jubilee administration. Uhuruto. The past 8 years of utter, complete, gross mismanagement. Not a single aspect of that mismanagement would have prevailed if there was a respect for the Constitution. If you go to issues of public procurement, if you go to issues of finance management, all the answers lie there. The procurement issues we have, KEMSA, Managed Equipment Scheme, KPLC and the energy sector, roads, etc., SGR. Have there been a respect and for the Constitution of Kenya, wouldn't be discussing this. But because it's monkey see, monkey do, it's a cascading effect. Leadership, the leader, President Uhuru Kenyatta, has shown members of his government that they can, with impunity, disobey the Constitution. We have nothing wrong with our Constitution, and it embodies the will of the Kenyan people.
Okay, so if we have a constitution now, right? We have a constitution now, and essentially what we are saying is we don't need to touch this constitution. The rule of law is what needs to be followed. We don't need to touch the constitution. And according to what you're saying, if we have leaders there who are not following this same rule of law, what is to guarantee that if they are removed and you bring in a new set of leaders, what is to guarantee that they then would pursue and follow the rule of law?
It is again the character, and Boni said we shall know them by their fruits. Number one, if we were to reform this IEBC so that we don't have servers sitting in France, so that we don't have Chris Musando's murdered because they refuse to give up credentials and so on and so forth. If we don't have electoral systems that are fraught and rigged from the get-go, people might actually get the leaders they actually want to see in place and in power. And if the leaders in power, and I'm talking now about the legislature, our elected leaders who have a duty of care, who have fiduciary oversight over the accounts of this country, who have been voted in by the electorate, if they go to Bunge to start taking brown envelopes, refusing to enact legislation around, for example, the 2/3 gender rule, hence the advisory to dissolve parliament. We as the people can say, tutawatoa nyinyi nyote. And the problem is, we have a situation where also the legislators look at us and say, utadu, we shall be rigged in, we shall rig ourselves in, we shall continue to earn our high salaries. So it is a fundamental problem of leadership, and it's coupled with a flawed electoral system. It is not a flawed constitution. And let me say something about amendments. Amendments ultimately are ameliorative. They are corrective. They are not repealed. When Section 2A was repealed, it was removed, allowing for multipartyism. That was a significant change. You call it a repeal. But if you look at even what BBI is proposing, they're going down a repeal pathway. They're literally saying, we want to alter this whole constitution, and arguing that it is this constitution, which is the sovereign will of the people of Kenya, of you and me, all of us here. When we promulgated it in August 2010, we are saying this is the reason why things are bad in Kenya. Things are wrong in Kenya because of defiance, disobedience, impunity, and disrespect for the rule of law. It is our leaders who are the problem.
But we seem to speak as though if the president and the cohort of people he sort of like has some charming understanding with agree on something, it automatically becomes law. We have other arms of government. What do they do? Are we saying, therefore, that the legislature and parliament are also in cahoots, so that we are actually done for, we are doomed, and everything that will happen anyway because there is no viable check and balance in this country? Is that what we are saying?
Bonnie?
Yes, that's what you're saying, because what Uhuru did by co-opting Raila into the government is actually killing the National Assembly. So instead of having a National Assembly that checks on government excesses, the National Assembly became Uhuru's rubber stamp. And then the other thing we have is actually when we go to court and we get court orders, Uhuru defies those court orders. So the only way to defend this constitution is by ensuring that it's not changed, and when Uhuru leaves power, we can get men and women who can actually implement it fully. It hasn't been implemented. The Chief Justice told the President that Parliament as it is unconstitutionally formed, but the President hasn't done anything about it. So, because we're in a very hard position where we can't trust Parliament, we can't trust the President, the only last thing we have is the judiciary, which Uhuru wants to take away by this BBI. We must try as much as we can to defend it for the next 2 years, and with the hope that the people who come next, and the way we vote as voters, we're going to elect leaders who are not going to betray the Constitution.
So, essentially, if I were to understand you well, Boniface, you're saying that we find ourselves in a fairly hopeless situation and we should just give up because Parliament Parliament seems to have lost its teeth, if it had any. The judiciary is iffy.
Has been caged.
Yes, and if you're talking about the opposition, that one went to the dogs a hell of a long time ago, if you'll pardon my French.
Yes.
And if you talk about the leadership, well, we don't even want to talk about it and have any canine associations with it. So we're actually saying that we are in a fairly helpless and hopeless situation. Is it really true?
The power belongs to the people. We are more powerful than the people in power. So if we just take our stand and say no to BBI, Uhuru Kenyatta has only one vote, Raila has only one vote, Ruto has only one vote. We must ensure that there's no rigging of BBI, because if there's no rigging, BBI will fail.
Mm-hmm. How can we ensure that?
It's going to fail completely.
I think, and when I hear when you say the power is in the hands of the people, I understand that and I get it. But then now, do Kenyans really understand the power that they have to be able to bring this kind of change about beyond voting yes or no? Because if you ask me, that's the beginning of the process. Once you say yes or no, there are so many other things then that have to be done thereafter. The realization of the responsibility of then who you bring into power after that. To Linda Katiba, for example, to say that here's the constitution that exists that actually can be brought in and people should follow the rule of law. Do Kenyans realize from where you are sitting? Do they realize the power that they have and are ready to do something about it? Or is it a document that has been presented to them at this point? And they say, we're going to accept the document.
An abused and beaten down populace. A population that is so poor that is skirting or flirting with completely falling off the edge because of all the daily things we have to deal with, our bills, our daily lives. we are disempowered to the point that we don't realize how powerful we are. And I want to say something too. Even if right now we understand chiefs and assistant chiefs have been going around using government resources to collect these signatures, and then it'll be pushed through county assemblies, and then we find ourselves in a referendum. Let me tell you, even if we mounted, and we are mounting, a most robust no campaign, has the IEBC been touched? If the IEBC has not been touched, whatever we vote, the millions of us who would say no, if we use our common sense for a minute, divorce ourselves from our political and tribal kingpins who are telling us think this way or think that way, and say, for me, Jerotich, as a Kenyan, is this yes going to ameliorate my life, or am I saying yes to support an elite compact elsewhere that has nothing to do with me? If people thought like that, they would say no. Okay, so we go vote no. Then what will IEBC do? That's why we are saying this is the cart before the horse. The issue here is that if we are going to have even a franchisement process that is free and fair, we have to resolve and reform the IEBC while we protect the Constitution of Kenya. But power belongs to the people. And when we say that over and over again, maybe people will begin to understand and believe it. But right now, we have always seen ethnicity and political party spaces weaponized against us. So if you open your mouth, you're saying that because you're a Kikuyu, or you're saying that because you're a Luo, or you're saying that because you're a Kalenjin, or you're saying that because you're civil society getting money from where, or you're saying this because you're Tanga Tanga or Kieleweke. The politics of division mean that there's so much noise in the room that we have no chance as Kenyans to think clearly. And what we are saying as Linda Katiba is step back, think for yourself. But right now, if you have assistant chiefs being given deadlines, being given ultimatums, you have to bring me X number of thousand signatures. You're just going around the houses at night. People are being forced to sign. This is what we are hearing. By tomorrow, if they say 7 days for 1 million signatures, it means that they already had a program in place and they knew how they were going to collect signatures.
When you're running a campaign, you have a program. I want to ask you this question, Chero. I want to ask, and even you, Boniface, when the Building Bridges initiative was announced by the president and it was even gazetted, there was a clear path to what they were supposed to do. There was a nine-point agenda. There was, let's look at what has been ailing us as a country. Let's create this team. Okay, let's not even talk about the formation of the team, whether it was all inclusive or not. Let's just say that team was formed. It went around the country and it was collecting views. Did the civil society, did you, Boniface Mwangi, and your political party, did you, Jerotich, say, as an active citizen, did you present your views? Now that you have very strong views that maybe it's IEBC that needs reform, that our problem post and pre-election is the issue of leadership and IEBC. Did you present these views to this team?
May I start off? Oh, sorry, Bonnie, do you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead, Chero.
Okay. For me, from the very beginning, and I am on record saying that it was a flawed process from the very beginning, and I refuse to participate because I refuse to legitimize a flawed process. You cannot say something is flawed and then you jump in to start engaging inside there. From the very beginning, and trust me, I have read all these documents. I'm not even shouting on the outside. Even if I did not participate or support, I have thoroughly scrutinized these documents to understand what it is and why I continue to believe that it is a Trojan horse and it is a falsehood and it is a way to hoodwink the people of Kenya. So I will answer categorically. I did not go to any of those sessions. However, I know that they went around on this 9-point agenda to 47 counties. And I know that actually from a very personal perspective because my dear father would send us selfies from every county that he visited with the task force when initially, and let me underscore, and I say this at the beginning, their task was policy and administrative reform. What in these 9 points, when we go around the 47 counties, can we come back and translate into a series of policy and administrative reforms? At that point, there was no mention of the Constitution. But me had already seen, and several of us had seen the mischief afoot. And when they came back with their report, we said, Allah, this report that was around policy and administrative reforms has now evolved into a raft of far-reaching constitutional amendments. And then they were taken one step further and turned into a steering committee with other technical experts, and they were now told to come back with a final report that looks at statutory or constitutional changes. It was a hoodwink. It went from saying, we have shaken hands, we want to be peaceful, we want to love one another, we want to talk about what is going wrong in this country, to a space where now we are at statutory constitutional
I'm gonna ask
level.
the second part of the question, but before that, let's hear Boniface. Did you present your views and why?
No, I did not, because it was an illegal process that was not necessary. And I want to take a step back and talk about you guys saying how powerless we are. We're not powerless. The multi-party democracy came because of young people going to the streets to demonstrate against Kanu's regime and repeal Section 2A. Kanu lost power in 2002 because people showed up and voted Moi out and his team. 2007, 2013, 2017, every time there's been an election rigging, it's the people who defend and protest on those things. The problem is the people they protest on their behalf and they try to defer to the
All right, Boniface, we're having issues with your line, Boniface. We're having issues with your line. The second question I wanted to ask in the run-up and the follow-up to that was, so now that neither of you presented your views to this because you felt that from the very beginning this was a flawed process, there are very many others who presented their views before the same task force, before the same team, and they felt that this is what they wanted to present. Now, is there anything in the report that, if you read the report, not just the report, but the findings of the task force as it went around the country, is it not possible that there are people who went and presented whatever they were presenting could then also mean that we needed some fundamental changes to the way we are governed and the way we run ourselves as a country? Is that not possible, Chero?
I think, and I asked earlier on this year, I said, I want to know the Fatma, the Wanjiro, the Chepkoech, the Atieno, the Mora, who asked for a prime minister, who asked for 5 people to consolidate their power there at the very top. I spoke with some comrades from Marsabit who said they even appeared before the committee to present their views, in fact discussing the need for additional constituencies in Marsabit County. When you look at even the additional constituencies that are being issued or given or promised in this final version of the amendment bill, do you see Marsabit there? So I also want to add that even those who came and put forward their views, many of those views never made the cut. And of course, you cannot have every single view. I've heard that argument. You cannot have every single view make the cut. But what made them choose certain views over others? And what made them insert certain views or ideas that actually push us towards that constitutional change space? And finally, those who like to say that, we should keep quiet because we did not give our views and so on, I reiterate and underscore that I'm a citizen of the Republic of Kenya and I have a right to voice my views. I will voice, and I will not be boxed or painted into the corner of BBI, as in you had to be inside it discussing it so that you have a voice in this country. Even those of us who are opposed to it have a voice, and we will continue to speak. And in fact, we will study that document far more than those who are busy giving their views around the country, and will come up with very clear reasons why, on top of the process being illegal to begin with and a hoodwink, it is actually deadly and devastating for constitutionalism and the rule of law.
The people who are giving their signatures to this at this time, and let's look at what's really going on the ground right now. Those who are giving their signatures, there's some people who would go along with the process politically just because. And it seems as if this is rolling down the street. It's going on as we speak. And we're saying, are we going to be able to stop it in its tracks and get people to actually see this thing for what it is, according to you? Are we going to be able to do that? Because it looks like, the show is already going on and Act 2 is coming into town. So what are we doing? What are we doing here?
Bonnie?
So the National Intelligence Service has given the government feedback on BBI, and I've told them that it's going to fail. That's the reason why the government is using chief, administration, police, and fear and intimidation to get the signatures. Civil servants have been forced to sign the BBI forms. So there's not a popular mandate by anyone.
You know, Boniface, I am going to ask you to provide evidence for what you're saying at some point.
Evidence,
but carry on.
It's publicly. It's Fred Matiang'i who launched the BBI signature drive. It's also an illegal thing because it's a CS. He's not supposed to get involved in politics. So this thing is not being run by well-wishers and political party members. It's being run like a government project, but it's not a government project. So as far as we are concerned, it's going to fail unless they steal. And so, how are we going to succeed? The people who are hungry, who are sick, their kids are home, doctors have no PPEs, know very well that BBI is a sham, it's a hoax, and it must fail. So unless the government has a way of faking signatures, they cannot meet the target. So we meet at the ballot. But the other thing we need to do, we intend to go to court to stop this illegal process. The government is using our taxes to satisfy the needs and the greediness of two men.
We've been told nobody can stop reggae. This is psyop. We are constantly being threatened and abused. You should see the abuse being hurled on social media and other spaces. And you know, it's an attempt to say, actually, you will never succeed. But it is because, and I underscore what Boni said, they're running scared. The acceptance levels, I don't have the polls in front of me, CT, but there is evidence. There's been some polls done around the acceptability of BBI versus, in fact, I read somewhere it was even at 11%. This is unprecedented. I think the two gentlemen who shook hands were expecting that they would have at least 60 or 70% and landslide their way into this new version of the Constitution, which is ultimately legal in how they are doing it. But we will not be intimidated. We are not afraid. We have gone through a lot of these things. Even if they call us whatever, keyboard warriors, if we were so irrelevant as keyboard warriors, why are we causing such ripples?
You know, the beauty
of
of this
corona,
entire...
we cannot maandamano and we cannot do these types of things without getting ourselves caught up in situations and being super spreaders. So yes, we are not on the streets right now, but we are doing public education, public advocacy. And I have a message to the middle class. And you know, my sister and brothers in the Situation Room, the middle class listens a lot to this particular station. You know, the middle class sits around quietly, almost embarrassed, afraid to engage. They think maandamano, struggle for rights is the business of unemployed youth from Korogocho or from Madare or from Kibra. Let those ones go and be fodder for police bullets. Us guys will sit pretty, pretending that we are not broke, pretending that we are not able to meet our rent, pretending that we can afford hospital bills. Na tunafilisika, we cannot fuel our vehicles, we cannot afford electricity. I have a message to the middle class sitting around here sending their kids to private schools, and I am a culprit because the education system has collapsed. We keep looking for our private solutions to public problems. We look for our private solutions to insulate and protect ourselves from the realities on the ground that one day we will wake up and there is no Kenya. And I am urging and encouraging the middle class. You see, they say, Jisome, if you say you have gone to school and you've read, take the time and read this amendment bill. And trust me, we took a few days in retreat a couple of weeks ago. A few of us, about 10 of us, Haki, it was like being back in school. We had to study word for word, amendment against which article, do a comparative analysis. This is not an easy process. It is deliberately made dense and complicated so that you don't know what's going on. But this middle class that sits there aloof and pretending everything is okay in their lives, tell them to take the time as they sit in their backyard sipping whatever, and tell them, read this document and find out that
Message
it has
is home
for you, and it has nothing for your children, and it has nothing for your great-grandchildren, unless you're planning to emigrate, unless you're planning to take yourself to another country. We must all rise up collectively and protect and defend the Constitution of Kenya, because that is where our freedom and liberty and protection lies as the people of Kenya.
Thank you very much. The message is home. Jerotich, Seii, active citizen, and Boniface Mwangi, politician, activist, and award-winning photojournalist. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And time for us to take a break on KTN Home. We'll be back shortly.
Linda Katiba.
Thank you.